All right. Welcome back to another episode of Oak and Rock Fatherhood. My name is Anthony Miglarino, and as always, I'm joined by good friend and colleague Zach Small. Today, we have on a very special guest, Brett Ullman. He is a author, a speaker, but more importantly, he is a father. And today, we're going to have a discussion. We're going to talk about the work he's done, what he's doing, and how he's helping other fathers improve their lives, improve the family unit. Brett, welcome to the show.
Hey, really glad to be here. Thanks for having me on today.
No, I'm glad you decided to show up, man. This is going to be a good conversation. You know, this is something me and Zach we speak about often. We're always talking fatherhood. It is something that is ingrained in us. We meet in person. We do obviously Zoom calls, and it's good to have these conversations. It's something that doesn't happen enough. A lot of fathers are missing this, or it's absent in their life. Right? They don't have these conversations. How can I be a better dad? And to be two men that we live our lives freely, we live our lives openly. We're masculine. We do good things, and to bring that perspective into parenting, to tell other men, hey, look, you can be tough, you can be a bad dude, but you can also be a good father. You can be loving, you can be caring. You just have to start applying yourself and learning the best tools to help advance your family, improve everything. So, um, I want to also address a couple things with you. If there's something you'd like to share, I know what drew me to you was the Navigating Everything series that you do, the one on parenting. That is just filled with so much information. I think that if you're a dad and you listen to it, it could literally change your life, right? From every point that you make, everything you talk about. So I'd like to dive into that. I'd like to speak to you about how you came up with it and where it started.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So just if people don't know who I am, which is probably most people, I'm a full-time speaker and author, and I live 45 minutes east of Toronto. So I'm Canadian. So you guys are wearing t-shirts, and it snowed yesterday for me. So this is the difference of the worlds we live in.
It's like 70 out right now.
Yeah. But I was a teacher for a decade. I taught in the public school board in Toronto, kind of inner city. A lot of my kids came from jail and psychiatric for a few years, which was really interesting. And I left that 16 years ago to do this. This is kind of what I do. I travel, I speak, create courses, online content. My biggest thing, as you said, Anthony, like parenting, navigating everything is probably my biggest talk. I also speak on mental health, which is something I struggle with, which is another thing for men. I think we don't really address sometimes our own struggles. I finished a master's degree at a school in Chicago and then had a breakdown and spent a year at home. And this was 2012, it's 2022. I still struggle with anxiety. I still struggle with panic attacks. And then I speak on things like addictions, dating, media, which is another thing that a lot of these things come back to parenting. When should my kids get a phone? How do we deal with social media in the house, video games and all these things? But to go back to your original question, parenting, navigating everything, how did that kind of begin? So I've been talking on topical conversations and I was speaking even when I was teaching. So like it was 22, 23 years into this. And my kids, and so I'm married with two kids. My wife's a nurse. My daughter Zoe's in second year university, and my son Ben's in first year university. So I'm this really unique situation. Both my kids are away, which kind of the parenting conversation, right? The progression of parenting. There's this, 0 to 18, which is very unique. And then many kids head off to college, university, apprenticeships. And so they better be prepared. Anyways, I was at a talk speaking on mental health, and a father came up to me after and he said, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" It's my favorite time of a talk, right? Real questions get asked after. And the guy says, "Hey, how do I talk to my daughter about sex? She's 16. And I'm like, "Good question." And I went to answer, and he interrupts me and says, "Oh, wait, by the way, she hates me. Go ahead."
Oh man.
And
Really sets the stage.
So first I waited for like, is he joking? And then he wasn't. And I said, "What do you mean she hates you?" And he said, "Oh, forget about that. How do I talk to her about sex?" And I'm like, "Dude, forget about sex. What do you mean she hates you? Because that's everything. If you don't have a relationship with your kid, you are not speaking truth into their life, no matter what you like. You can try, but you need that relationship for it. And so I realized I don't have anything on parenting, like the art of parenting. What are these things that we need to do? And so that kind of began my research. And I'm not a researcher by trade. I'm a kinesiologist by trade. I did a kin degree, thought I was going to go into the sports world, went into teaching. Don't really know how I did that. But, I think we need to look sometimes at the foundations of how we move forward with things. And so parenting to me was one of these things that I began to research. And so I probably read for almost 2 years. And I'm fortunate in that my full-time job is this, so I don't need to go to another job. But I just kind of came up with, and people can find that talk on YouTube. I mean, you can link that in the notes later. I kind of came up with like 4 things, like parenting's, like, what is parenting? If some guy's listening goes like, I want to be a better parent. If we don't know what it is, how do we actually do it? And then time, like, what does it mean to spend time with your kids? How does that look? Because statistics show that men spend very little amount of time. And then if while we're spending time, we're just on our phones the whole time, like, time's kind of useless. Communication, how do we communicate? How do we talk to our kids? Do our kids only think that we love them when they get good grades or follow rules? Do they know we love them when they mess up? Do they know we love them, no matter what happens? And then the idea of discipline. And I think we get discipline wrong. I think we think discipline is punishment, and I think discipline is teaching. And so that kind of began this conversation on parenting, navigating everything, which is now spread to, I have a talk called Men Navigating Everything. And I'm now researching media navigating everything. I love the navigating everything thought because all these conversations are huge. Like, they're not a meme on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Like, these are big conversations. There's nuance to the conversations, and every guy listening is different, right? Different in their situations, like whether they're single dads, married dads, there's all kinds of different kids and our own strengths and who we are. So I like the idea of navigating everything because I think we each can be better. And I always use the quote by Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, do better. I love that. Like, none of challenging guys isn't about shame. It's not about beating them down of here's what you've done wrong. It's about, hey, we can have better outcomes. So let's look at some of these best practices and challenge each other to be better.
What I like about that is how broad of a net you just cast. You went from mental health to connecting with your kids to sex, and your experience with being an author and speaker. And that's exactly what we're trying to address here with Oak and Rock is fatherhood is not one thing. Being able to speak to your kids about sex, that is not what makes a good dad. It's the entirety of the picture. It's all of you. And the way I see it, it's almost like a wicked long canvas. And when you started, you kind of start drawing. You're painting the picture of what your life looks like. And each brush stroke is an action you take. And if you look back and you're like, man, it was really bright, and then maybe it got a little dark, and man, it's like all I have right now are dark browns and blacks. Well, how do I make it brighter? I want a brighter future. I want brighter colors. Well, you need to start making brighter actions, brighter strokes onto that timeline. And eventually the picture will start to form, and then it'll be going in the right direction. And so what it starts is with, and I guess that's a question to you, when a man is hearing this and he's like, man, I really like what you 3 are talking about. Where do I start the process of being a man who can navigate everything? And I'm sure that you cover this when it comes to parenting and understanding these things. There's an angle you take, but it's going to be unique to the man. And at the same time, it's going to be a universal decision to just change your behavior. And so when it comes to you, when men come and have this conversation as to, look, I don't want to learn to talk to my kid about sex. I don't want to just talk to them about their phone. I want to start being a better dad. So it starts with me. What actions or what advice do you have for these men to help them start working on themselves? And then you can lead into it. Now, here's how I would talk to your kid about social media. Here's how I would talk. And then you can move forward to those other things.
I think to me, there's something, when a guy walks up to me and says, I want to be a better dad, like, that's the starting point. The ones who frustrate me are the dads who are not doing that. They're not on a podcast or on YouTube watching a video like this. They don't care. The dads who want to be better dads, I think that's where you start. That's a posture, right? It's kind of saying, okay, here's my life. How do I be better? Now, in my talk, Men Navigating Everything, there's a rubric that I created. I like the term flywheel. It's just basically 8 categories saying, here's who we are as men. So I put down kind of like the body, mind, soul. Like we're physical beings. How do we make sure, we're physically healthy and, exercising, sleep, diet, exercise, those things. The mind, right? Do we need counseling? Do we need to walk through hurts, pains, or struggles? Like, I'm now a speaker and I'm a dad who struggles with anxiety. How do I, it was Pope Francis who once said, recovery is making a life despite limitations. And so how do we take the limitations and, I can still be a dad and a husband and a father. I talk about spiritual health. I do come from a faith community, but that's a component. Marriage, how do we be good? Like if we're married or, if we're, dating or engaged, how do we be good husbands? What does that mean? What does that look like? I got a couple of good book suggestions for that if you want to go into that later. Parenting, right? Another kind of chunk of that pie in the flywheel. And then I have finances and education, drugs and alcohol, which is a huge issue. The abuse of that I see affects, right? If we're looking at foundations, it's hard to be addicted to something and then trying to be a good father or husband. There's going to be some things that will affect. And the last one I put down is loneliness, which was a chapter in my parenting book. I mean, the stats on loneliness for men, they say the average, now most stats come out are American. And so a lot of my stats are American. It says the average American guy has less than one friend.
Wow.
Like, so people kind of laugh and go like, how does someone have 3/4 of a friend? It's like, well, no, it means that a lot of men have none.
Yep.
And like, if you don't have any friends that you can sit and chat with and, like butt heads or have someone even challenge you. Wow, I saw how you were treating your kid. Let me give you some better ways to address that. Or if we don't have those things, I think we need to, and COVID's kind of made us even more isolated and I think even more lonely. Like I know even for me, like throughout COVID, when we were in lockdown situations, stuff, my wife's, on Zoom with friends at night. And I'm kind of like, I'm going to go for a walk on my own. Like we're different sometimes how we address it. But Zach, to your question, I like that idea of a flywheel. Like I like that there's a whole bunch of areas. And I'll give you a link for this because people can download that flywheel and rank because each of these things has a like 1 to 10 of how you're at. So you might go, I'm doing pretty good in my marriage. I'm an 8 out of 10. Now, I wonder if we gave that to our wife, if there would be the same ranking, another conversation. But maybe for mental health, you're like, man, I'm a 2. I'm struggling. And maybe you're like, for, sexuality, which is one of the pies too. Like, maybe I'm addicted to porn right now. It's affecting things. And I'm always like, you can start with, if you rank them like worst to best or best to worst, I don't care what you start with. Just start somewhere. It's John Maxwell, the leadership guru. Don't know if you've heard of him before. Really good guy. He talks about like, if you're challenged by something, choose one thing, whatever it is. So like I can do a talk for men on that flywheel and there could be, 8 different things that guys go, I want that. I'm going to start there. Just start somewhere and move forward. I think we should move forward where we're struggling the most. That's like, I'm a strengths-based person, but I think we should start where we're like, if it's your mental health, which is what so many guys are dealing with, let's start there. I'm really big on being healthy physically, emotionally. Let's start with a good foundation to then put our parenting and our marriage and our work on top of that.
So you brought up mental health multiple times, and I am huge on this component of just mindset. And I'm wondering, through your work, through your speeches, and through your reading, and just being a man, you had to have at some point gone through and just assessed yourself. How did I hit the point where it was too much? And you said that was 2012, correct?
Yeah.
And obviously it's a delicate subject, but when you look at yourself and you pieced it together, I'm sure you found some components that you're like, I didn't address this, and that's why it grew there. And I didn't address, and there were moments where you could have caught it, and I'm guessing here, please fill me in if I'm incorrect, where you're like, all right, now I can, 2020, hindsight, that's fantastic. I can see now how I hit that point. There are a lot of men now that are overlooking those things. And I was wondering if you had any input for men, maybe if we're going to go down the path of everything that we're navigating, starting with the mindset, You know, if I'm saying, hey, you know, what's the one thing they can change? You know, the man, obviously it starts in the mind. So we have to stop overlooking certain red flags. We have to start being honest with ourselves. And I'm wondering if through your experience, you realized you weren't honest in some areas, that if you had been, maybe it would have prevented the full on like shit hitting the fan, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, so when it comes to mental health, what were some of the areas or you were seeing in yourself or you're currently seeing in a lot of men that you're working with that we should probably bring to the table, even though it's somewhat of a taboo subject of talking about, hey, what's wrong inside your head?
Well, I, like most men, just assumed I'm fine. And so I began to do a master's in leadership, and I'm taking it in Chicago. So for me, Chicago is a 50-minute flight. It's really close. But I'm an international student, and so it's expensive. And so I began, like, a normal speaking docket for a guy like me is about 125 dates a year, which isn't, there's busy months like your October, November, May. There's these months that are conference months and they're busy, but I began speaking 275 to 300 speaking dates a year.
Wow.
Which is stupid. I know it. Like, I look back now and I'm like, but in the moment I was like, hey, I can pay for like my hotel. I can eat food and I can buy my books. And I run a not-for-profit, and I'm like, well, I can at least, keep the lights on and pay myself. And so I began to have people, you know the term intervention. Like, I always thought, being a leader, I'd be the one intervening with people instead of being the one being intervened on, if that's the right term. So my wife, my family, my board of directors, my friends, like, the number of times I remember being at school and a buddy's like, hey, we should go for lunch. And I thought we're having lunch. And I get there's like 3 people and they're like, we're really worried about you. And I'm like, ooh, I didn't realize that this. But I said to them all the same thing. I said, I'll be fine. I will graduate March 1st, 2012, and then I will rebalance my life. So I know I'm unsustainable. I know my life is just like, I remember I once spoke 32 times in 14 days.
Whoa. Wow.
It was the most I've ever done. And I did a school in the morning. I think it was a Catholic school in the morning, a public school in the afternoon, a parenting talk. And in the middle, I'm at a coffee shop writing out an essay. And I'm married and I got 2 kids. And so I was just like, I just got to make it to that point. And I did. And the next day I woke up 2 hours early. And that was actually the last day to today that I ever slept through the night. And suddenly, weeks and weeks in, I'm getting exhausted. Like, I don't have the master's anymore. I'm just speaking. I'm balanced a little bit more, but I'm not well. And then I was at a speaking date and I almost passed out. Now, you can't tell from this. I'm actually 6'6". I'm a big guy. And I suddenly am talking, and like, I'm walking around the front like I always do. And suddenly the front of my head is like, talking. And the back of my head is like, how do you gracefully pass out in front of 500 people? Do I just fall over? Do I go down to one knee? Like, I've never had this before. And then I began to have panic attacks and like panic, fight, flight, or freeze. I was at a conference where people came to hear me speak, and I got up in the morning, packed up my stuff, and left. Like, I didn't understand. I just suddenly am not functioning. And then I collapsed in a McDonald's parking lot and didn't leave my house for 5 months and didn't work for an entire year. And I still struggle. I still don't sleep well. Like, this is not a ring. This is actually, it's called an Aura ring. This is actually tracking my sleep and all kinds of other things right now. Like, I'm still trying to figure out what's wrong with me. I'm at a functional medicine clinic, which is doctors and naturopaths and counseling. But the original question of looking back, for me, I said I'd be fine. And I was wrong. Like, I'm a guy. I'll be fine. I can push through. And I think too many of us push through and we don't see the signs. And I'm not saying everyone who pushes really hard is going to have a breakdown. That's just not the reality either. But I think so many of us are really overworked. We don't take vacations. We don't take time to be with our family. We don't even know how to recharge. Like, what does recharging mean? We come home from work and all night you're on your phone or your iPad or your laptop, and you go to bed late and get up early, and then we're neglecting exercise. We're neglecting friendships and community. And then suddenly we're like that guy, my daughter hates me. We're struggling in our marriages. We're not healthy. And so there's all kinds of things with that, because mental health isn't an easy, like, I think I came into this through burnout, breakdown, use whatever terminology you want, but other guys come into this through concussions, through playing football, through high school. A lot of our wives struggle with postpartum after having a baby. My wife's one of those. Too much time online. I mean, statistics say if you spend 3 hours a day on social media, you're more likely to be struggling with depression. Now, I would challenge that, saying maybe people who are depressed spend more time on social media. There's some nuance with those things.
Definitely.
And I mean, there's all kinds of things. I mean, we're unwell because of health things, but we don't get things checked. And so there's all kinds, and then even a predisposition. Like, if I could go back, I wish I wouldn't have done as much, but it doesn't guarantee me that I wouldn't have struggled, because there's some guys who'll be listening to this who lead very sustainable lives, but you barely can function. So it's not just you have to be over functioning to struggle. You might have, and this is where we get assessed properly, right? Like, go find out what's wrong. I know that's a huge answer. I mean,
No, that's a great answer. I
good.
mean, honestly, it had me thinking of a few things. One is the fact that we're even having this discussion is the point of the discussion. A lot of men will not talk about this. And to me, it doesn't matter whether we come up with a conclusion or not, or if that somebody can relate or they don't. What matters is that they see men, fathers, speaking about, hey, how's your mind? What's going on between the ears? Yeah. All right, that should be a normal discussion. I talk to Anthony about this frequently. And one of the things that also reminded me of was Anthony. He shares a story about when he had a kid, the advice given to him on his firstborn was to work harder, go back to work, go work harder. And not only are we seeing that we're stretched very thin as men, where before you worked in the field as hard as you could. And then when the sun went down, you were inside, kind of doing your thing. There's no off anymore. This thing is always on, and you can always be distracted. Your brain is always running. And to hear somebody tell a brand new father, hey, stretch it, go back to work. That's your priority. And then go home and take care of the kid and then try to take care of the wife. It's a recipe for disaster. We're setting a lot of men up for huge stressors in their life. And honestly, for me, I speak about my sobriety. So I had to drop alcohol. It was an issue for me. And I share that not because I even want to talk about it. I share it to normalize the discussion on it. Yeah. To me, I'm just not drinking the alcohol. That's literally I do less than I was doing when I was drinking because I'm just not drinking. And so what am I going to talk about? I don't talk about not believing in Santa Claus because I just don't do it. Why sobriety? Because it would normalize it. Because it will let other people kind of see into my world as to how I got rid of it, what led me to noticing I had an issue. And that is what has helped people. So I appreciate you opening that up. And while it was a very broadcast, answer, that's exactly what men need to hear is, look, there's not one thing that's going to set you up for this. It could be anything. Even if you're living a comfortable life, you could realize something isn't right. Something in the back of your head, you're watching yourself interact with people. It's like there's two of you in the same moment and you're just evaluating yourself and wondering what's going on. And that's like the split. You're starting to realize something's up there. And if we could maybe speak about it, maybe that'll save, maybe you'll still hit the wall, but you're not going to spend 5 months in the house after. You're going to be able to lessen the damage.
Yeah. The question I get asked by guys all the time is, so they'll wait around. So people come up to my table, we chat, and there's kind of a guy off in the corner. And they come up after and they say, hey, do you think I struggle with mental illness or mental health? And they'll give me their story. And my answer is always the same. If you think you struggle, you struggle. No one's walking up to me and saying, do you think I'm anxious? Unless you feel anxious, right? You feel your heart fluttering. You're shaking a little bit. You're trying to catch your breath. Like you just feel anxious. And no one's coming up and saying, Brett, am I depressed? Unless you feel blah. Unless you feel like you're dragging a backpack of rocks around with you and everything, there's just such weight to it. So I think, we address that we're struggling. I mean, there's the quote, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Now the rest of that usually is, but it's not okay to stay that way. I agree with part of that. For someone who has anxiety or depression, there are ways out of that. For someone else who might struggle with bipolar, schizophrenia, it's not as easy to say, like, it's not okay to be that way. Some of us have struggles and I think I'm one of those. I think I'll struggle the rest of my life. But it's trying to figure out, like, if I was doing a physical speaking date and I was with you guys, I sit in a chair. Someone called me the sitting speaker and I kind of laugh at it. I get I call them old lady chairs, big wingback chairs, because I've learned when I'm speaking and my body gets anxious, if I'm in a chair and I just lean back a bit, it's irrational thinking I'm going to fall out of a chair or something, but I calm a little bit down sitting in a big chair, and it works for me. And so it's trying to figure out, like, for every guy listening, whatever you're dealing with, first, what is the issue? So go get assessed. And assessment is not on YouTube. Assessment is not on TikTok. Assessment is going to a doctor, a psychologist, like someone who's trained. This isn't going to a restaurant, having some wings and chatting with a buddy, and he says, I think you have anxiety. Like, we get assessed by people who can do this. And when you get assessed, you then, like, your issue might be sleep. My biggest issue is sleep, but I don't have sleep apnea. Whereas I have friends who have sleep apnea. They get put on those, I call them Darth Vader machines, but like BiPAP sleep machines, and then they're better. So go see a doctor, change your diet. There's a really great book. Do I have a copy here? I do. Called The Ripple Effect. Dr. Greg Wells, sleep, eat, move, and think. Like, just foundational things. If you're unwell, before we head to mental health medications or other things, let's eat better, because, food is medicine. There's a quote that says food might be the culprit or the cure, which is a really interesting line, but food is medicine. And I'm not saying you got to go become keto or vegan or whatever else. I'm just saying eat better. And if you hear my talks on YouTube, I say them all the time, 5% better. There's the book by Atomic Habits by James Clear. Yep. Like, I think he says 1%. I'm always saying 5. Like, just eat 5% better today. Put some spinach in your smoothie. You won't even taste it as it blends up into your NutriBullet or like. And then sleep better and sleep more and quality sleep. Blackout blinds, and don't be on technology an hour before going to bed and whatever it might be. And then sleep, diet, exercise every day, whatever it might be. Like, I like going to the gym and doing weights. Other people do classes or spin or bikes or jogging. Like, I don't care. Whatever works for you, do something. But like, start with those foundations. And I add into that kind of the body and the mind. Go see a counselor. And again, a registered person. I'm actually back in school for this. I'm going to become a psychotherapist about 1.5 years from now. But I especially want to work with men and guys like me who've journeyed these long struggles and they don't really know what to do. And people give them quick, easy answers. Have you tried vitamin D? Have you tried jogging? And it's like, those things are good answers. But until you know what's wrong with someone, spitting out some have you tried, it doesn't really work. And so, and especially in the church community, we often say, have you tried faith? And it's like, faith is not the answer to mental health and mental illness. Like, it might be foundations for those of us with faith, but it's not the answer to it. The answer is going to be the majority of the time found in the body and in the mind, whether it's learning strategies to cope with panic. And the number of guys I hear I had a year ago, I had a call from a buddy and he says, can you talk to a friend of mine? And I'm like, what? And so suddenly I'm transferred to this guy. He runs one of the biggest banks in Toronto where I'm at. He says, I just closed a $20 million deal. And he says, I can't walk away from the board table. So he says, I'm at a table with like 30 seats and I'm paralyzed and I can't move. What do I do? Like, just so many guys are struggling with things. They don't know what to do. So if you don't know what's wrong with you, then how do we begin to move forward, right? It's kind of like we talked about parenting. If we don't even know what parenting is, how do we move forward? First, get assessed. And for anyone who's listening going, oh man, I'm so glad that's not me. It might be one day. So why don't you eat, sleep, think, like, do these things and teach out from a parenting standpoint. How do we teach our kids to have, like, I'm really big on prevention. There's a book called Upstream by Dan Heath. Don't know if you've read it. If you haven't, one of my favorite books. Like, before the house is burning, how do we make sure the house isn't on fire? Mm-hmm. Like, before a guy's addicted to porn, how do we make sure maybe we don't walk down that path? Before you're struggling with mental health, how do we prevent that? And then with our kids, how do we not have a 16-year-old who hates us? Like, you can work at preventing that. It's not perfect, but how do we look at the prevention conversations?
Yeah, and I think that's the better question, right? We can find all ways to cope with mental health issues. We can talk about how broken men are, but why is it happening?
Yeah.
And this is where I relate a lot of it to parenting. That's when we're young, this is when our brain is developing, and this is where we create an image of who we are. This is how we learn how to deal with difficulty, or this is how we learn how to love ourselves. So if we're getting dysfunction, abuse, manipulation, physical violence in our home, how can we expect men to grow up and be confident and not have these mechanisms that take over them, right? Mental health issues to cope with pain that's never been resolved,
Yeah.
right? It's childhood trauma. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, Brett. Prevention is one of the biggest things. It's a cause and effect. So we see the effect. We see how many men are hopeless, who they don't know how to run their own lives. They don't know what it means to be a man anymore. And it's not just men. There's a lot of women who also suffer. I just, I bring everything back to if we can start from a solid foundation, if we can be aware of mental health is an issue that starts when we're born, right? I mean, the first 5 years are the most impressionable.
Yeah.
And if we can learn to parent accordingly, right? Be effective parents, to be peaceful parents, to teach our kids life skills that are going to better them when they get older, you would see a lot of mental illness go away.
Well,
There's always going to be a traumatic experience that can cause, the alterations in a brain, whether it's a car accident, somebody dying, a tragic event. But I really believe that we could probably eliminate over 90% of the mental illness that we see by just raising our kids better.
the new phenomenon we talk about is over-parenting. I don't know if you talked about this. Like, the more we over-function as parents, the more our kids under-function. We could spend the whole, like, an hour on that. Now, the truth is, when we over-function in our marriage, the other person under-functions. When we over-function as friendships, and like, you could use that for everything, but when we over-function, helicopter parenting, when we, swoop in and fix everything for kids, snowplow parenting, I live in Canada. Snowplow parenting might not be a term you use in South Carolina,
What's a
but
plow?
like pushing everything
Never
up,
heard it. Yep.
lawnmower parenting. There's one called, Black Hawk, like military helicopters, where
Yep.
parents swoop in, blow everything up, and then go away. But the more we overfunction, the more we rob our kids of learning how to be prepared for the world they're going to go into. In colleges and universities these days, there's a book by Julie Lythcott-Hames. She has a great TED Talk, and she talks about how what we've been doing is protecting our kids from life and not preparing them for life. And so these kids now head into, and she calls students not quite fully formed humans, which is you kind of chuckle at it, but I look at students today who are heading to college, university, apprenticeships, whatever they might be doing, and they're not prepared because mom or dad have done everything for them. In the book iGen, Jean talks about a grade 12 kid, so a senior. You guys use grade 12 or do you use senior, or both?
Both.
Both. Okay. So grade 12 girl goes to a mall with her parents or her mom, and she can't be away from her mom for more than 30 minutes at a time. Like, the anxiety provoking that the parents have created in this girl, that she can't be away. Like, this is where we need to prepare our kids. We talked about coaching, or like coaching our kids to go be in life on their own, not with us, that we're always there with them. We're not fighting all their battles. We're teaching them how to talk to their teachers, challenge a teacher on marks, even deal with bullies or different things, because they're the ones heading into the game. They're the ones who head off to school tomorrow, or you got a kid who works at Starbucks tomorrow or McDonald's, and how will they cope and do things? So the foundation for parenting to me is preparing our kids for life, because if we don't, they won't be prepared to live life on their own, which is really what parenting is. We're preparing our kids who will one day be on their own, and then one day be married with kids on their own.
Do you think that this control and fear-based parenting is new, or has this always been around?
I think it is new. Books like Hold On to Your Kids, we chatted about this earlier, Gabor Mate and Gordon Neufeld, anything by Leonard Sachs. He wrote The Collapse of Parenting. In my mind, I kind of see the over-parenting happen as 24/7 news cycles came to be. Kind of like the Anchorman movie series, right? We saw the 24/7, Ron Jeremy. But as that came to be the norm, like I'm watching Like, doesn't matter where you live, you have like, so I have a thing called City Pulse News, and it has like the ticker, the stock market, a news thing, and the weather. The other day on the bottom, it says a 15-year-old teenager dies. And my heart kind of goes, oh, and so I read, it says in Sweden. And I'm like, this is what's provoking anxiety a lot of the time, right? Like, there's 7 billion people on the planet, and somewhere something happens bad. And then we begin to go, well, that might happen here. But the truth is, in the US, in Canada, statistics of, people being abducted, like, and all of these things are way, way down. But because now with social media, one person can post a fear-based article, and then we listen to that and assume, well, that must be everywhere. There's books like, and I'm a huge promoter of books, and I'll give you a link later. You can give people where they can find
There's a lot of books we have to read after this episode.
My list is getting ridiculous over here.
I told you. I warned you.
Lenore, I think her last name's Skenazy, but it's called Free Range Children. Like, if you have chickens, like, it's free range chickens, but it's kids. Like, let kids go to the park on their own. Like, wherever you live, go to a park today where there's little kids, and you will see parents walking around, like, waiting for a kid to fall. And it's like, let them fall. Like, I always said to my wife, I'll let my kid fall where they'll break their arm, not where they'll break their neck. Like, they need to climb trees and have some fun and get dirty. And there's kids in my community who don't ride bikes because their parents are worried they'll fall. Like, at 4 years of age, I'm pushing my kids out onto a sidewalk. Like, so much of our fear-based parenting is affecting kids. Kids don't get licenses anymore. So stats across North America it's down between 60 and 80% of teenagers get their license. Like,
wow.
I'm 50. Like, in my day, everyone got their license the day, and for me, it was 16. The day you turn 16, you get your license. And the moment you can drive. But kids always say to me, oh, we drive a big car, we drive a van, and like, we live in a big city. It's like, most of us somewhere have a big city near us. And you know what? You can drive a van, and you can drive in a big city. I mean, New York might be another conversation, but like, you can do this. And so from the moment our kids are 13, 14, when we start saying, oh, driving's really tough and it's scary and everything, your kids will start being fear-based, as opposed to, it's a really great opportunity to drive. Let's go drive in a Walmart parking lot or a church parking lot. And every time we talk about it, it's positive. But everything that we talk about with kids being fear-based becomes our kids' fears. And this is our problem. And our problem is now affecting our kids becoming like productive members of society, because now they're terrified of everything going on.
That's an interesting angle, and it's an important one too. One of the things Anthony and I have had this discussion is we speak to our kids more like adults than most of the parents out there. We give them that level of respect. And so then you're faced with the challenge. Am I being too honest? Am I being too open? Am I introducing too much to them? And what's the right amount of push and pull? And it's one of those things, you only learn it as you experience it. Like, oh, I might have told him too much because he's now showing signs of concern about something that doesn't matter. Or she's showing signs of, she's thinking about this and she never thought about that before until I had explained it. So maybe I need to explain to her, this isn't something you need to worry about. You can let that go. And there is a push and pull to it. But I will say, a lot of parents are suffering from that anxiety of the 24/7 fear mongerer called the TV and mainstream media. And they're not explaining to their children ever why they're not, while they see it, that they're not concerned about it. And that's the issue I'm seeing, is a lot of parents are concerned. They're freaking out over Ukraine. I mean, people are breaking out into hives. I saw a post of a lady who's nervous and she's afraid to go outside because what's happening in Ukraine. And I'm like, how is this a concern to you? And I actually just recorded the podcast with Stephen Story, and he's down in Brazil. And he said he was at the bar with his lady, having a good time. He's watching the fish swim around. And there were some dudes vacationing there. And they were talking about Ukraine and Russia and all these things. And they were from America. And he's like, you're in Brazil on vacation right now, at dinner on a Wednesday by yourselves, talking about CNN. Why? And to him, it was because they had nothing else in their life that pulled from them. They had nothing else that they were focused on. There was nothing of a higher priority. And so I see that with a lot of parents, is that they're so concerned about what's happening in the global level that they're not taking the time to appreciate what's happening in their backyard and putting the priority there and putting the focus there. And it's a hard thing in a media focused world. Everybody wants, the next like, to be on the fresh trend, what's happening new. Man, I don't care. And I catch a lot of crap for that. because I don't. I'm worried about what I can control. I don't think the human mind is meant to know everything happening on the globe at all times.
And that's the problem with our phones and technology. Like, so I'm creating this new talk on media right now. And I mean, everything goes back to the algorithms, right? Like their only goal, and I'm not like big bad Facebook or other things, but my point is their goal is to keep you online. And so just like if I run a casino, the goal is to keep you inside the casino. Like whatever the job is, they want you, you go to a McDonald's, they want to upsell you to something. Algorithms create like a world which is just a mirror. So like if all you're looking at is fear-based stuff, it will give you more fear-based stuff. And you will only see that the world is this scary place where everyone wants to harm you. Like Tim Elmore, the author, talks a lot about that. Like we've created this world where kids are not only spoiled, but they're scared that everyone's out to hurt them and get them. But if you've started down that pathway, like there's, TikTok, which is now beating Google many days of the week, is the biggest website on the planet.
Wow.
But like, Google to me takes you to places. TikTok is just people for the most part, with no authority, just talking about anything in the world. Doesn't mean they're right just because someone is talking about it, but the algorithm will send you with like whatever. If you have TikTok and you scroll through it, whatever it's giving you is what you're watching. A father says to me the other week, why does he said, I signed up for TikTok. It only seems to give me like half naked women. And I'm like, because you're watching that, like
reality check.
Hey, to be fair, I was scrolling through and it was like motivational speech, coaching, twerking, dad talk, motivational speech, twerking. I'm like, how is the twerking finding its way into my rhythm? I'm trying to watch like workout videos and parenting videos.
So that is where the algorithm's trying to send you down different pathways. If we're all doing dad stuff and a bunch of dads are looking at that, you might also like that. So it's trying to send you things that you might like.
It's manipulation.
Yeah.
What do you think about media as far as the manipulation behind media and how the algorithms work? If you raise kids within a home that doesn't have manipulation, that they're, almost immune to it because it's not a language that you've spoken in your home. Do you think they have a better chance of not being drawn in, not being addicted to that instant dopamine hit from scrolling?
The biggest thing that I think we need to do is and I'm not a government being in charge people, but I mean, when Facebook and Instagram recently were having to go, was it US Congress? I forget where it was. Remember they were they were talking about, they know Instagram's affecting young girls and different things.
Yep.
I mean, the biggest thing would be those sites need to change. And this is what the book Stolen Focus talks about. Like, how about if I'm near one of you guys in South Carolina, it's like, hey, Zac and Anthony are, 20 miles from you. Why don't you connect and go for dinner? Like, that's what these things should be. But and I mean, we all own stocks and mutual funds in these companies as well. So we want them to give us money. So to get money, they have to have more eyeballs. So like the way to change it is changing foundationally what they do. What we then do is, and I have a series on YouTube, how to have a better relationship with your phone. And it's just trying to acknowledge, like, yes, these sites are like, they're manipulating certain things. I mean, what's that YouTube series? It'll come to me later. There's a couple of YouTube things they brought out looking at not Netflix, like Facebook and these other kind of things and how, the algorithms are working. But I just take it very
Social Dilemma.
Social Dilemma, that's the one. But how do we see even Social Dilemma?
I love that movie.
But here's my concern with it. In talking about fear-based, it was fear-based itself with that guy and I'm like, it's almost like both sides of the spectrum end up using fear. Like, just like you're fear-based, and it's like, well, I'm going to use fear. If you need to use eerie music to sell your stuff, you are part of the problem, but from the other side of the coin.
Yeah, we actually had this conversation.
If you saw me throw my hands in the air, you took Anthony's point.
I didn't like the movie at all, and I agree with you, Brett. I think it was completely fear-based. It's painting a narrative that they control you, that they have full manipulation of you, your kids, that you're helpless, that somehow we have to fight this boogie monster and everything will be okay. I think it's more of an internal fight where we need to build emotional regulation. We need to have our kids and obviously ourselves be more adapt to not being controlled. Right? To me, that's where it comes from. Um, but I did want to just shift real quick because there is an important subject I wanted to speak about. It's physical violence, spanking.
Mm.
And when you guys were talking earlier, we were mentioning the helicopter parenting. And what I have a theory about why that showed up in society. That's why I asked you if you think it's new or it's been around. And for centuries, kids have been um, physically hit, right? They've been tormented, they've been smacked, slapped, they have been brutalized by the parents, by society in general. And I think what has happened through time is we realize that spanking, hitting kids, it's not getting the results that we wanted, right? It's increasing aggression. It's making more kids rebellious. Besides the other effects of increased addiction and mental health issues, increase in mental health issues, I find that parenting has shifted from that since it wasn't working to hit a kid, now what's another way that we can manipulate them?
Mm.
And they resort to controlling, right? They resort to not allowing their kid to have any freedom. And we're seeing the effects of that now, right? I think they're very similar from spanking, right? I think it's both abuse. If you're a helicopter parent, it's abuse, right? If you're neglecting your kid, it's abuse. If you're physically hitting them, it's abuse. And it's weird how they make these pivots and they shift to different things that are not effective, that are abusive, instead of just finding a better way that is actually working.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to get your viewpoint on spanking. I know you're a Christian, and I know there's a lot of there's a lot of opposing views in that realm. So what are some of the things, and if you can give us a good argument to why not to spank your kids?
Sure. It's interesting. I have two videos that are my largest on YouTube. Is masturbation a sin, which is like 100,000 views, and is spanking okay? Like it's interesting what people are looking at. I mean, masturbation is another whole conversation, and I look at how it's affecting marriage and other things. But spanking, so coming from a Christian background, and the truth is, I think anyone in North America, like we do come from these Judeo-Christian roots. So, I mean, that verse that talks about spare the rod, if we spare the rod, spoil a child, it's kind of taking it a little out of context. But, if you don't hit a kid, you're going to, you hate them basically. So here's the reality. I think that verse is taken out of context because you can either say, like the Bible talks about the rod or a rod, not baseball, New York City, a rod. A rod. Like one is about physically hitting someone. And in the Old Testament, like when, an Egyptian beats an Israelite to death, it's a rod. But the rod of discipline, he who spares the rod hates his son kind of idea. This thing, if you don't discipline your kid, you hate them. It's also a proverb, and proverbs are wisdom and adages. They're not promises, right? They're not something you're just, I think we take that out of context as well. So I think the biggest thing is that as a Christian, I've been in every denomination you could ever imagine in North America. No theologian thinks it's on spanking. None that I've ever talked to. So first off, it's not that, well, we have to do it because of this. So first off, we take that aside. Well, it's not biblical. Well, here's the big question. This is for all of us, faith-based or not. Does it work? Because if it works, then we'd say, well, this is what to do. The largest study ever done was 166,000 children. It was a meta-analysis of all these kids. It's very clear. I think it was 1,000 pediatricians. It doesn't work. So
yeah, I think that was over 50 years also.
Yeah. So it's not something as faith-based people we're called to do. It doesn't work. And then we forget, children are challenged at these ages by fatigue, hunger. They're little, they don't know what to do. And so it doesn't work. It's not biblical. Now, by the way, everyone who was spanked isn't forever damaged. I was spanked. Some of you were spanked. It's not like we're broken forever. And everyone who isn't spanked isn't spoiled. Both of those things, though, can be taken to what I would call abuse. You could easily take spanking to abuse and easily take no discipline, and kids just go wild and we don't train them. But there are other things I think we need to do. I mean, natural consequences. Now, by the way, for spanking, there's an author named Ron Morris who says that kids don't get spanked at 8 a.m. They get spanked at 8 p.m. And this is like, the reason is because adults come home after a busy day and we're tired.
That's an incredible insight right there. That's incredible.
And then we hit a kid. It's like, it's about us. And so if all these negative things are happening, and if our goal, I mean, if the biggest goal to me for a parent is this relationship, there's a chart that talks about two types of influence. One is positional, one is relational. So you begin with positional influence. You pick your kid up and leave, take them wherever you want. But this goes down. You're not like, if I'm at a talk with you guys, we're live somewhere, and you have an 18-year-old son, you're like, I don't like this Brett guy, we're leaving. He might say, no, I want to stick around, hear what he says. If you have a 1-year-old, you pick him up and leave. Relational influence begins at nothing and it grows. That's what you want. And this is also where, how does hitting a kid or spanking a kid affect that? I mean, the violence aspect of it, what are you teaching them? Like, there's so many negative things for it. And I think we spend a lot of time talking about that as opposed to talking about teaching. If a kid isn't doing well, do they know, like, get along with your sister? Do they know how to get along with their sister? Hitting them doesn't change anything. Taking their phone away doesn't change anything. Have we equipped them and taught them what they need for success? And this is why discipline to me has to have a purpose to it. And the purpose isn't just hitting. Now, authoritarian parenting is a little more do what I tell you. Like, if a kid's running across a street and you quickly grab them and pull them away from a car, different conversation. But we need to equip kids and teach them, not like, and this doesn't work by striking them. And we need to have a relationship with them. There's all these foundations to equip our kids. And spanking, to me, there's nothing that says it works. So the question is what do we do better? Natural consequences are a big one. My son Ben's in grade 10 and he heads out. So where I am, I was gonna say it's -10 for me, but that's the different system. So I don't know how cold that is. It's freezing outside. Like, you need a big jacket on, and he doesn't have one. And he's leaving, and I'm like, hey, Ben. And I'm like, yeah, you're in grade 10. Have a good day. So he goes to school and he comes home and he says to me, it was freezing today. Why didn't you tell me to wear a jacket? And I'm like, because you're in grade 10. And he's like, like, natural consequence. He learns this conversation and we move forward. Now, if there was more teaching that would be needed in there, teaching. But I think equipping and empowering our kids, like, we battle phones all the time, but we don't talk to kids about why they shouldn't be on their phones. We battle with, especially boys, but also girls, of, on video games for 8 hours a day. Well, maybe we look at the idea of what the average seniors graduating like today as a man can barely speak to someone, can barely talk to a girl face to face, addicted to porn, smokes way too much weed, too much alcohol. Like, if this is where you want to be and this is where you're at, maybe this isn't where you want to be. So it's not me saying get off your phone. It's saying, what is your goal in life and how is this working for you? So how do we change that? This works for me. I'm not working for it. And that goes back to that. I have 9 videos of how to have a better relationship with your phone and working with your kids on it. But helicopter parents, over parents, fear-based parents aren't working with their kids. We're just trying to tell them what to do.
Yeah, it's amazing how we can't give kids common courtesy that we ourselves would like in life. We almost see them as, second-class citizens, that they're not worthy of our time and admiration. And like you said, opening up with the father who said, my 16-year-old daughter doesn't like me. Well, shouldn't that be the goal? Shouldn't we want our kids to admire us, to look at us like we are the people in their lives who can help them, who can teach them, who can guide them into becoming better? And so many parents miss this mark, right? They think that they have to control. They think that they have to punish their kid. You mentioned taking away things. I went through that in my home. My wife did. I've been peaceful parenting for about 15 years now. So it was a process that my wife had to learn from seeing me do it, because we were both stuck in traditional parenting prior, right? Authoritarian. But I saw that things didn't work. I saw that when my wife was mad at our daughter, she would take her phone away. And that would just raise conflict. Right? That would take power away from my daughter and say, you have no other choice. You're stuck here in our home, but we control what you do. And I think if a lot of dads would realize we want to raise our kids to be resilient, we want to raise them to be high functioning adults. We have to start giving. We have to start living by these principles. Like what does it mean to be a good person? We can't force it on them because you know as probably well as I do. Anything that you force on somebody, they're going to do the opposite, especially kids.
I try really hard at not having the dynamic of parent kid. Like I say to my kids, now my kids are 20 and 19 or almost 19. We're for you. We're not against you. Like anytime there was can I or a battle, like we want you to do everything. We want you to go places. How can we make this work? Like if we could say yes, we want to say yes. If we ever had to say no, like we're for you. It's not bad parent, like we're being bad to you. Or like, so how do we work with you? Like we would do yearly family meetings and it was the best thing we ever did in our house. So every August, just before school started, we would sit down. We talk about everything. Do you need, what are you going to play for the fall? Do you need new shoes or cleats or what do you need? Like we like to ski as a family. So do you need new skis or what do you want to be for Halloween when you go out? Like my wife was more that, but like, she doesn't want to know you want to be a dog October 30th before you go out. But these are the things that we would walk through together. And then we had kind of just this open moment of like, well, any other questions? And kids would talk about what they're frustrated with. Or if they were young, when are they getting a phone? Because guess what? All kids are getting a phone. But the idea like you're never getting a phone, of course, how do we not exasperate our kids? And how do we work with them? And this even goes to other things, which is like, I always say to parents, do your kids know you love them always? What's the author, Robert Munch, like forever and always? Like, do your kids know that if they screw up and they get drunk or high at a party, or, I even said to my daughter in grade 9, like, honey, if you ever get pregnant, she's like, Dad, I'm like, listen, if you ever do, you can come to me. Like, I don't want that. There's lots of negatives with that, but like, I will love you if there's nothing in the world that would change how much I love you. And my daughter cried. Like, do our kids know they can mess up and they can come to us? Because if all we're going to do is spank them or ground them or send them to their room, they're not going to be the one who comes and talks to us. And so we want them to come to us with their journeys, with their struggles, with their addictions, with their mental health struggles. I think sometimes, I don't know if you guys remember the band REM from the mid 1990s. They have a song called Shiny Happy People. I think sometimes that's who we want to be. We're the family. We have everything going on. It's like, no, if your kid's struggling with self-harm or depression, it's okay. We can cope with that. And you need to say to your kid something as simple as, like, I'm so sorry you're going through this. We'll get through this together. I don't know what to do. I'm going to talk to a coach or a teacher or a counselor or a pastor or someone who can help us with this. But your kid needs to know that you are there for them, right? That's the idea to me of attachment parenting. Our kids attach to us and then go out into the world, into friendships, but they can always come back to that home that we have.
Earlier you we were talking about the signs that you saw that if you could go back, you would have understood like that was an indicator that something was coming down the pipeline. And for a lot of parents, when they hit the point where the child is showing those symptoms, the self-harm, the lack of confidence, becoming more reclusive, and you look at it, it's one of those things where you can't beat that out of them. You can't pretend it away. You have to address it. And similar to what you were saying, evaluating the tempo of your life, that's a good time for a parent to say, whoa, something isn't working. And if they turn to the self-loathing, I'm failing as a dad, I'm not doing my job, that's not helping your child. No. What can you do? Let's just start working on, I'm a very big proponent of solution-focused speaking. If you're talking to me about your problems, it's just redundancy without progress. Yeah, we spoke about your problem. Didn't fix it. We just spoke about it. I'd rather speak about how can we solve that problem? What can we start to do? And, when you have a child in that situation, a great way is to bring it back to their level. Like you said, hey, I'm here for you. And maybe we lost sight of that. Maybe we stopped talking about it. Maybe we all got caught up in the rush of modern living, but I'm here for you. And that is my highest priority. And like you were saying with your daughter, and your son, nothing is going to take me from that. So how can I work with you? How can I help you get through this? And, one of the biggest things in the military is doing preventative maintenance so you don't have to take corrective action. Let's fix it and take care of it on the way there so it doesn't break. You know, and with our kids, sometimes we do want what's best, but our actions are not going to get that result. So you see the mother and father, I love my kids more than anything. But then you ask them, you're morbidly obese, you're always on your phone or TV, you know, and you're an alcoholic, or, you know, you're constantly just shoving some vice down your throat. If you really meant the words you're saying, which I believe they do, but they're just not seeing that the cognitive dissonance that's happening. I love them more than anything. I'm totally absent from their life and I see them daily. Something has to change. If you love them more than anything, you've got to act like it. Your actions will show that. And, you know, it's through discussions like these that we help people realize, oh, there's work to be done. You have to work on a relationship. Just in this discussion, we were talking about overparenting, underparenting. If I was over speaking, neither of you would be able to speak. And therefore, this would not be a great relationship or discussion or a great product for people to listen to. It would just be the Zac show or the Anthony show or the Brett show. But it's when you take the time, you give, you take, you push, you pull. You know, that's the dynamic we need to have with our kids. And if you can start, and I believe if parents start to look at their children with that level of respect to the future man or woman they're going to become, it makes that a lot easier. I don't look at my children as my children. You're my kid. You're my son. Like, of course they are. But I look at them as I have a son and a daughter. Someday that's going to be his own man. Someday she's going to be her own woman. I speak to them like that now to help flex those muscles so they're ready to do that when the time comes.
This is where, too, we have to make sure we're asking good questions. Like sometimes we just get busy at life. Like whether we're both working, kids at school, like life just kind of goes by quickly. Like, do we have moments where like everything we do can't be just about watching the newest Marvel thing on Disney Plus? Like there needs to be time when we're going for a walk or we're like family dinners. Family dinners should be as much as humanly possible. I think it was Columbia University said if you have 3 family dinners a week, like all the stats of bad things go down. But again, we're attaching to our kids. And this isn't just shoveling food into our mouth so we can rush out. Like it's turning and saying like, so in our house, we would do rosebud thorn. Tell me something like rose good that happened today, but you're looking forward to. And thorn, what is something that really sucked today? And my wife and I are part of this, right? The idea that we're
You do exactly the same, man. I'm so happy to hear you say that. It makes me feel like I'm on the right track.
Like this is where your kid might go, yeah, I really struggled today. Because you want your kid to be able to say to you, I was bullied today. Or yeah, like we said to our kids when they were really, really young, we had them prepared that they're going to see pornography somewhere. And someone on the bus when they were in grade 2 passed around a phone with some naked person on it. But like, we want them to be able to come to us. There's nothing, if every time they come to you, you jump down their throat and you yell at them. And it's like, as opposed to walking through that conversation, that relationship is so important. And those dinners, because suddenly they're gone. Suddenly my kids are both lifeguards 2 days a week each. And like, then we switch from family dinners to a family night where we're going to go to see a movie, we'll go for wings or do whatever. But the work on like if for every dad, like work on having a rich relationship with your kid. I don't like the term date nights because there's some creepiness to that, but I like the idea of having a night where you go do something with your daughter, your son, your whoever. And our kids are different. Like I coached who was the coach? Zac, was it you or was it Anthony? Yeah. So like I coached
coached too.
I've coached every team my son's ever been on. And I coached like AA baseball to finish it off. My daughter's a dancer and a gymnast. I always kind of say I threatened to coach her dancing class, which is a joke you can say once. But her and I had to work at our relationship. So even now, like her and I watch the TV show Modern Family together. And we don't watch it with anyone else. So she's away at university. When she's back next, I don't even know when it is, Easter, the end of the year. That's when I'll watch the next one. We both love iced coffees. We both love chicken shawarma. There's these things we like. We don't know why, but we do. So when we're together, we do that. And this is where you learn to love your kids, which is another book. I'm giving so many book suggestions, but the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
You ever heard, like,
I've got that one.
Do our kids know, like, are we loving our kids in the way that they need to be loved? You know, the artist Drake, I'm assuming.
Yep.
So Drake has that OVO clothing line. And so my son really mentioned I'd love a shirt from that. So the other Christmas, we went to a pop-up shop. Bought him. I mean, it was stupid expensive for a single t-shirt. But when he opened it Christmas morning, you could see like he was a little teary, and he said, like, you remembered that? It's like, yeah, we know you, right? We want the best for you. So this is where we need to get rid of the adversarial kind of parent kid, and like, we are a family. We're going to work this through. We're going to survive. We're going to be like, we joined a gym as a family to be healthy together, to model that. We go for walks in a park. Like, whatever you do, work at having that foundational relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of what we should be doing, is build a relationship instead of trying to fit into a role of I'm the father. This is how things have to go. And I do agree, right, that there's nothing more powerful than someone who says they love you, but not only saying it, but they know things about you. They're taking the time to invest and learn about what it is that you like, who you are as a person. And that's something that I emphasize greatly with my kids. Right. I try to learn as much as I can about them and know what they like, what they don't like. And it comes back to me, right? They have interest in me. They care about what I like. And it's the same thing going, when your kids are in a bad mood. If you're going to be reactive and you see it as an attack against you or a tantrum, you take offense to it. So then next time you are down or you're not feeling well, do you think your kid is going to care? They're going to show you exactly what you've done to them. So it's creating a mutual relationship that's based on that trust and that honesty. And I think that's super important, right? If we want our kids to love us, and if we want them to know that we love them. But I got to go back to the family dinner thing, because that is an important topic. And I know you probably get this often. There's so many fathers who struggle with this, right? They're forcing their kids to eat food. They're making them eat their vegetables. They're making them sit at the table and not leave until food is finished. And it's tragic, because, like you said, this should be a time of connection, right? You sit down, you break bread, you're talking to your kids. What do you tell dads to not be distracted, right? To focus on what matters instead of always worrying about, oh, my kid's not eating enough, or my kid's even if they're on their phone at the table. How would you address that?
See, if as a family, the goal is, so in our family meetings, we talked about family dinners, that dinners matter. So this is the no phone zone in our home. We also said when we're driving in a car, unless we're driving 2 hours somewhere, if we're going half an hour, no phones. These are the times we're going to chat and talk. So for dinner, it's no phones. And so the phones, and they're not on vibrate. Because, I mean, if you've ever been in a restaurant and a phone 3 tables away vibrates on the table and we all kind of look up, like, we're all so in tune with that vibration of that phone. Phones are off, like airplane mode, and they're away somewhere. And I think dinners also are about preparation, right? It's about preparing the meal. This is where guys have to be better. There's a book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky talking about the emotional labor of women. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but
Zach's going to need a new pen.
COVID has shown the emotional labor of women has skyrocketed, the things that they do, and men have not grown up with that. There are no studies that say that in a home, everything's fair. Yes, men often do the fixing stuff. We do snow or grass and landscaping stuff. And someone says, well, I cook dinner once a week or something. And it's like, well, there's 3 meals a day and we do dishes maybe. So Eve Rodsky has these cards. I have them right here. There's these cards you can get off Amazon, and they're literally all these different things. So here's the issue with this. I don't think many even understand emotional labor. So here's what emotional labor is. A number of months ago, my wife comes, I'm heading downstairs. She goes, there's a card on your table, on the kitchen table, and a gift. It's your dad's birthday. We're going to go see him later today. I have no idea. I didn't get a card. I didn't even remember it's my dad's birthday. My wife has had to hold this like somewhere, buy a card, buy a gift, book with your parents. I haven't done any of that. This is not okay. These are things that we need to step up and be better, but we step up and be better as couples so we can also teach our kids these things. So dinners are something we're all involved with, but the actual meal itself is asking good questions, talking. It's not just shoveling food in, but it's, how do you know, like, do you know your kids' best friends? Do you know what they're looking forward to in school? If they're a senior, where are they going to go next year? Or how do they feel about that? How do they feel about what happened at school today? There's one person who talked about, when my kid comes in and you say, like, how was your day? What do you like? And they're like, lunch. Then your response should be, what did you like about lunch? Right? Anything to connect. And your earlier thing, Anthony, about, must eat these foods. All that stuff to me should be gone. Like, my parents used to make me eat, like, I hate peas.
Still to this day?
To this day. So making me force eat peas, this is what's creating an adversarial relationship. Like, each of us has foods we don't like. Our kids don't know. And guess what? Like, my son, we'd go to like a Subway restaurant and he would get like a cold cut combo. We all know what those are, with nothing, that and bacon. There was no vegetables, nothing else. He's a child. Kids don't like vegetables. So could we make a smoothie and throw something into it? Like, we try to get vegetables into them, but it's not, I'm the parent, you do what I say. It's like, hey, if we're going to live and be healthy people, you need some vegetables. So what could we add to your meal today? What do you want? My son would say, carrots. Fine. Here's some carrots. And over the years, we'd go to Subway, you got to add one thing. What do you want to add? And he'd be like, lettuce. It's like, great.
It's going to be like salt and pepper.
Yeah. But it's working with your kids with this. And the old kind of school, well, you're going to eat your peas, you're not going to leave the table. You're just hurting your relationship. Like, if you're telling your kid, you're going to eat your peas, you're not leaving the table, and there's this adversarial thing. When that day they go to school and something happens really big, do you think they're going to come and talk to you? Because you're going to yell at them for something that happened, or if they did something wrong. Yeah. You want them to come to you and say, I'm so sorry this happened at school today. Or just, I got bullied on the bus today and it's really concerning me. Or someone said something and it's really, like, you want them to come to you with anything and everything. So making them eat some food that you like and they don't. Like, and this is where maybe you get them involved helping cook the dinner. Or you take them to a grocery store. Like, the first time we ever take our kids to a grocery store, and they're like, look at all this food. It's like, yeah. And they begin to choose some of those things that they like.
Yeah.
Or you make them taste. We say to my kids, we want you to try one bite of something to see if you like it or not. Because stats say it might take 5 or 6 times trying it until you go, oh, that's actually really good. Mm-hmm. But it's working.
When you break, or when you remove the force and the aggression, that's when you can become creative. That's when you can start finding other ways. You can get out of that rut of just saying, this is how it has to be. I have to force them to do this. And you make the experience, not just at the dinner table, bad, but you also create a negative attachment to food. Right? Yeah. And that's another mental health disorder that's plaguing this country, is children with eating disorders. It's horrific what's happening. And I'm not saying that's the root cause, but everything's correlated, right? How we treat our kids and the attachments we make with them, it's important. We have to be aware of it.
Everything affects everything, right?
Absolutely. And we talk about the preventative nature of this. So in this specific discussion, I love my kids. I want them to be happy and healthy. Okay. You want them to be healthy. Then when they tell you that they're full, let them be full and don't force them to finish that plate. They're not a good person for having a clean plate. They're a good person for knowing when to stop. That's how you get if a kid can't do something as simple as tell you when they're full, you're like, nope, I'll tell you when you're full. I know what's best for you. Eat the rest. And they're like, I don't want to eat that. I don't like it. I'm not hungry. That you are now starting the process. You said that not everything can be brought back to that. I think so much of it can, such a large percentage, that it's safe to say a lot of the issues we see that especially teens are going through stemmed from just the inability to even perform or explore their world on their own as kids. And so they don't know what to trust, who to be, what they're supposed to say. They're so insecure on trying to be the person that they think you want them to be that they forgot who they are. And that voice is still inside them trying to get out. So they have conflict within on, do I want this? Or do I want this because my dad told me I wanted this? And on top of that, what are they going to say when I can't make a decision on what to do about this? That's horrible. You don't want that in any child's head. That's a difficult life to live. And so that's going to manifest in many different ways.
I use a quote in my parenting talk by a guy named Tim Elmore, and he says, it's the job of every child to tear down their parents' fences and build their own. It has become one of those things for me. Like, I want my kids to eat healthy because they want to eat healthy. if you're just forcing kids to eat healthy and they head off to college, they'll do whatever they want. I want my kids to go to bed in good time and get good sleeps because sleep is so important. In my house, we stopped curfews in like grade 10, grade 11.
Mm-hmm.
Did your kids ever come home?
Never. They just were
I
gone.
haven't seen them since.
But our goal was, so like I'm big on progression of parenting. Like how we parent. You've talked about peaceful parenting. We've talked about attachment parenting. The goal is that our kids progress so that all our kids head off to college. Now, the term college in the US means a little different for us. So that's why I say college and university. But they head off. So they travel from South Carolina and they go to UCLA. They better be prepared to deal with unfiltered internet and having a phone and not being like, and how much time they spend and dealing with addictions and pornography and alcohol and drugs and boys and girls and all these things. This is where we want them to do things because they want to do it. So for curfews, we just said, we didn't actually say you don't have any curfew. We just stopped. So if they said, you know, it's Friday, what time do I got to be home tonight? We'd say, what time do you want to be home?
You just pissed off so many parents right now, bro.
I was just thinking, like, there have been so many points in this discussion where you are saying things that I'm 100% for, but the masses are not ready for because they don't understand what right now. The masses think so poorly of children that when you say, just come home when you're done with whatever it is you're doing, you know, come in, be quiet about it, lock yourself up, make sure we're cool. To me, your kids are supposed to live like adults before they're out in the world being adults. They're supposed to know how to operate like you're saying.
Well,
you're going to hear this and be like, oh, they're never going to come home. They're going to be out doing drugs and at the doing blow and like, what are we talking about? Why do we think so negative? I couldn't even think of drugs, man. You know, like bath salts, I guess.
You know when kids have the most sex? At 4 o'clock after school. 4 o'clock.
That's what I did.
This idea of it's 10 o'clock. All kids are doing is having sex and doing drugs after 10. It's like, how old have we become that we forget what it's like to be a teenager? And they're out at a coffee shop. So my daughter once said 2:30. She wanted to come home a.m. I don't sleep well. I go to bed at 10:30. And yeah, I'm 50. That's what I do. But my daughter said 2:30. And we're like, it's really late. How come? One of her friends was flying back from a vacation. They want to go for coffee and chat. The next morning, she's like, I'm really tired. I got to get a bit more sleep. It worked a little too perfectly, but the goal is teaching them about sleep and about being out late. Do we trust our kids? Because if we trust them at 10, why at 10:05 does suddenly something change? But the goal was to prepare them. So my kids are away at school. I don't know what time they got in last night because I'm not there. But I want them to have gotten in at a time that they can today do their studies or go to class or do whatever. So again, it's the goal that they build their own fences with eating healthy, with exercise, with good things for mental health, knowing that this is going to cause problems, especially for our young girls. How do we work with our young girls so that they choose this less? Not me saying, get off your phone and yelling. Like, how do we work with you for this? So it's a whole shift in mentality.
Yeah. Well, isn't that worry that we have as parents? Isn't that more of a reflection of our own mistrust in ourselves? Right.
Mm-hmm.
If we were doing a good job, would we really be worried about what our kids are doing? Right. If we were confident in what we've applied, how we've spoken to our kids, the lessons that we taught them, we know that they would be okay. Right. We know that they're not going to disappear and go out and, you know, join a circus or whatever kids do these days. And I think that's an important element, right? We, as parents, we have to, if we're not doing the work to be better parents, it's going to show up. It's going to show up in our relationships. We're going to have anxiety and stress about what our kids are doing and what they're not doing. So a big part of what Zac and I speak on is building from within, right? Becoming a better parent, learning how to be a better parent, learning where your faults are, where your mistakes are. And, you know, one thing that I tell a lot of fathers to do is when you do make a mistake, right? When you overcross a boundary, apologize to your kid. Yeah. Let them know that you care enough to say, I'm sorry that I messed up and I'm working on becoming better. And I think that's where a lot of dads struggle. They always seem like, or they always feel like they have to have the right answer. And that doesn't help anybody in a relationship, right? That just puts up a facade, a false image of what's really going on. So to help dads, they need to understand that there's nothing weak about apologizing to somebody that you might have harmed, especially your child.
Yeah. Can I just say too, for any parent, for any father who's listening, who's anxious, like about all these things you have to do, please don't do this on your own. Like I love a podcast and a YouTube channel like this because, it's like the old, I think it's like two back Home Depot slogan. You can do it. We can help. Like, don't do this on your own. Find guys to go hang out with, do life together. And you should not be the only person speaking truth into your kid's life. A lot of the stats say 5. There should be at least 5 people speaking into your kid's life. So take you, whether you're married or not. So like you and your spouse, teachers, counselors, coaches, like other aunts and uncles. When you have family over for a barbecue, don't just send the kids downstairs or off somewhere else. I want to be talking to my nephews. Hey, how's engineering going? What are you thinking of doing when you graduate high school? Like, I want to be building into them. Let other adults build into your kids and give them opportunities.
100%. And his battery died. It's happened.
Hey, I'm back. I've been podcasting for the past 4 hours, so it makes sense that it's going to eventually cook. But with that, Brett, reminds me, I was sitting down with Anthony and his family, and I was talking to his daughters. And I was doing exactly that. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you thinking about? What are your goals? What are you doing next? And they were asking me questions. And it was so natural because that's the lifestyle that he leads within the home, that when we want our kids to become healthy, functional adults who can just go out in the world and not just survive, but thrive, they display those traits and those skill sets. And that's built within the home before it's needed out in the world. You're speaking to your kids like adults before other adults, when they're on their own, are speaking to them. So they know how to hold a conversation. They know how to listen. Yeah. They understand the importance of bedtime and all these things. But you brought up a great point. There is no reason for a man to go about this by himself. And, we've been rolling for an hour and 20 minutes. I feel like I could talk to you for another 3.5 hours and I might run out of, ink with the pen on book list, but the discussion is one that we've hit a lot. And so for men who are looking to connect, they want to find more of your work. They want to dive into your books, your courses, what you have going on. We have links to a majority of your social media, but is there anything else we're missing or a main spot you think that these fathers or parents should go to talk to you, check out your work, and sort of start the process of becoming a better parent?
Sure. My website's just my name, brettullman.com. And I am not a blogger, even though I do put up blogs. I am more of a curator, meaning I collect. So I'm a voracious, whatever the word is. I read a lot, but I take the best stuff from that and put it on my website. Like something like I showed you these cards, like I post this stuff. Hey, and so if you go to my site and click on men, like you blog and then men, or blog and mental health, you'll find 7 years of the best stuff. Here's a great TED Talk. Here's a good, I posted the other day, counseling thing called Dear Therapist. It's actually a podcast dealing with marriages and stuff, but you want to be better in your marriage? Listen to someone else getting counseling for their marriage. Like I do that now at the gym. I throw a podcast on, but my website's filled with that. I do have a book, which is not a normal book. Now, I wrote this from a faith-based perspective. So I'm also, as you can probably tell from this today, I'm very practical as well, but this isn't some kind of bait and switch thing. I want you to just read about faith. But the first 6 chapters are
you can't phase us. Don't worry.
This is easy.
The first 6 chapters are on parenting, communication, all the stuff we've been talking about. The last chapters, other than one on faith, everything else is mental health, media, pornography, dating, loneliness. How do we practically engage those conversations? And then I have all my social. And the newest thing I'm doing is doing parenting videos on TikTok, which someone might go, dude, you're 50. And I'm like, yeah, my son said to me, you got to be on TikTok. And for a year and whatever, I'm like, dude, I'm 50. I'm not going to do a little dance or something on it. And so I went to put up my first video. And like on YouTube, if you put a hashtag, you guys do fatherhood or something, you can't tell how many people see that. On TikTok, it shows you. So I put down parenting, 3 billion was the number beside it. Now, I don't know if that's views or posts or whatever, but that's a huge number. So I'm now posting, I think I only have 6 up there, but.
So when are you picking us up in your private jet?
As soon as I become influentially famous and get all the money. But this is where I think we all as guys, here's kind of a practical tip I'll leave you with. You want to fill your social media feeds with stuff, not dinner and dogs. Now I have an English bulldog. I like any pictures of gorgeous bulldogs, but I feel so anytime, like once I'm done with this, I'm following both of you on all your socials because I want anything that you guys do to come into my feeds, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We all have all of them, but thought leaders, fathers, authors, anyone who speaks on things that are interesting to you in your growth as a dad. Like I follow all kinds of health people and podcasts on, counseling, because it's going to make me be a better dad and a better father and a better husband. And it just helps me. So I want to fill my socials with that. And so for me, at the top of my website is all my social media as well.
Oh, that's perfect. It's been a great discussion. And honestly, that takeaway is it plays into the discussion at large. If you want to be a better parent, if you want to be a better dad, fill a timeline up with those better things. Fill, instead of just jamming to the radio that's blasting hate music or rage music or whatever music or the mood you're in, listen to something that's going to educate you.
Yeah.
Make discussing and listening about parenthood normal. Normalize, like I said, the discussion that we're having now. This is very the three of us could sit, hang out, have coffee, and talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
It's that normal in our lives. Some men, you take them, put them at that table with us, their throat would close, their mouth would go dry, because speaking about their performance as a father is so foreign to them that it's inconceivable to speak to other men about such a private matter. But to me, it's such a great role. It's literally the greatest role you'll play in the life of another human being. Why not invest in being your best at it?
It should become the
upon
common, not the uncommon. This should be the norm.
And it should update. Things are going to change, and we're going to change, and I'm going to change my opinion on some things because what's working in 2022 might not work in 2030. Okay, I've got to be a different dad then. I've got to fit those times. And so I will. But that only happens if I'm listening and kind of have my thumb to the pulse and I can feel what's going on. Where can I improve with my kids, with you guys, with the social media at large? What can they all teach me? Because we've removed physical proximity as a limitation. We're talking to you. You're in Canada. Yeah. We talk to guys from across the globe. We'll have meetings where it's international forums. These guys are coming from everywhere. We no longer have an excuse of, well, that's the way it is around me. No, dude, find a different circle. Find a better circle. Find someone that's talking about these things to really help you.
Yeah, for
With
sure.
that, Brett, thank you very much for coming on. I know you're a busy man. I've got links to all of your stuff below. For those who tuned in, again, it's not about just listening to what we're talking about. It's about applying the information. Take what it is we discussed, apply it to your life, and then you'll start to see change. Anthony, another one down, brother. For everybody who tuned in, this has been another episode of the Oak and Rock Fatherhood. Thank you. Stay well. Check the links below. You're not going to want to miss the next that Brett is dropping. Take care.